and scores! Great move by Davies. Well, this would be something. Oh! Ausgezeichnet! Brian White chips. It'll make it!
Welcome back to another episode of Caps Cast presented by Whitecaps Fan TV. As always, my name is Matt, and I'm joined with Damien again here.
Hey everyone, how y'all doing?
This is, I guess, a monumental episode. This is our 10th episode of Caps Cast. So
We made it.
We made it, officially double digits. That being said, it has been a very quiet week. In terms of on the pitch, but I think there's been some, I guess, how do we describe
maybe
developments
on the transfer strategy? Would you say?
Yeah,
not even on the transfer strategy, really, just on like getting the fucking hopes for the fans.
Administrative side of things.
Yeah.
I think the biggest blow was the LAFC game gets rescheduled due to the Leagues Cup.
Like, fair play to LAFC for getting through. They, for me, they're probably, between them and Miami, I'd say the two strongest teams. Even Cincinnati, maybe, I think it is, in the East. But, yeah, I think LA are right up there, so I expect to see them go quite far in the Leagues Cup here.
Kind of hitting their stride.
Yeah, and they've just added Olivier Giroud to the mix, who
debuted as well.
That's not a bad thing, right?
But so we get the game moved, which is unfortunate. I was looking forward to maybe playing them now before what looks like our final run-in of the season. And interesting enough, the game gets postponed till Thanksgiving Sunday. Or Canadian Thanksgiving Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Which is, I think it's an interesting choice. Obviously, BC Place probably had some sort of stuff going on, like prior engagements, and like that was the date. But very interesting, and unfortunately, it happens to be the run-in of the season. So,
yeah, and like with that, with how you look at it there and say, yeah, BC Place probably had something else booked. Man, what are we doing? Like, how can we be a professional MLS club and play out of a government-owned facility? It's fucking like with Manchester City, and we're playing out of the council house that is the Etihad. Like, what is going on? It's not even built specifically for football, well, soccer. I don't know. Like, we should not be playing in BC Place. Like, it needs to be knocked down, and the owners should fund a new stadium. A new state-of-the-art stadium built for football, soccer.
I think it was years ago they actually had got the fans' hopes up by saying they were going to do like a waterfront stadium right outside like the waterfront area, like the waterfront SkyTrain station. That was going to be potentially a site for like a waterfront football stadium. That got shut down. Maybe that was all just like hearsay. But I think
you're right in that, Matt. What you're saying, you're exactly right. The owner, though, one of the four, he actually owned Steamworks, that whole industrial complex around there, including the Steamworks building. He owns that. Well, he owned it, but back in 2021, I believe, he sold it to a Montreal-based company,
which kind of shut the door on any sort of development. Then there was also the talks of Empire Field kind of being a permanent place, maybe getting permanent structures in there to just be a football-only stadium. But they settled on BC Place. And here we are playing on turf, probably the most undesirable surface in the MLS.
Yeah.
We've seen so many players kind of give it the snub, which it makes sense. It's like, I mean, we've both been on the pitch and it feels like almost cement, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you saw it when Wrexham came over. They they were able to lay the grass pretty quick for that Wrexham game. Why is that not something we're able to do? Like, why is that not something we're able to do for the MLS? I understand not having a grass field for the CFL, with them just like throwing themselves around and digging the grass up. But if we're able to go in there and put 4 inches of soil and grass straight on top of the turf, why is that not just done for the Caps?
Cost, I'm assuming. Cost.
It's all
Cost.
And yeah, like, I guess really with the cost of that, man, I know we've not got a game to discuss this week, but in terms of the ownership of the club, I think that itself is something that needs to be discussed. There's 4 of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to? We before we kind of started recording, we had an outline of what we were going to talk about. Do you want to go into the ownership group now? Is that what we're?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
I think so. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we're trending in the right direction here.
Yeah. The ownership group is made up of 4 people: Greg Kerfoot, Steve Luxo, Jeff Mallett, and Steve Nash. With, I think, Greg Kerfoot being the wealthiest out of the 4. And like,
yeah, I think he's the majority owner.
Yeah, so that itself, them 4 are worth $2 billion combined between them. US, not Canadian. So what's that? Maybe 3 billion Canadian? Around there, is it? So it's a hell of a lot of money. The club itself, they don't do enough, man. The fact that we don't have an actual stadium that is the club's means that all the gate receipts are split 50-50 with the province. The club, for the last, I think, like 20 years, since 2011, has operated at an operating loss because of this. Like, this is a massive part of why we operate at a loss. Like, last year in 2023, I believe the loss was 14 million. But the owners don't care, because when they get the loss, all they do is write that loss off against their other companies. So to them, it doesn't necessarily matter if the club's at a loss, because when they look at the actual value of the club over the last 20 years, they paid, I think it was 10 million to get into 40 million to get into the league. And the club today, or well, in 2023, was valued at $410 million. So in the 20 years that they've owned the club, they have 100 times the money. Well, 10 times the money, basically, right? Gone from 40 million to 400. So they're not going to give a shit. And man, it's easy to pick on one person here, but this Greg Kerfoot, I did a little bit of digging into him. And just so we know what kind of person this guy is, right? Honestly, from a shady fucking businessman point of view and like perspective, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, this is a guy, like, if we're gonna fucking start a mob or like a mafia or some shit in Vancouver where there's some shady guy that needs to like fucking run it and knows how to break the law and get away with it, this is a guy. So he started a charity up, right? His charity was taking donations in the millions. Millions, okay? They got shut down by the CRA for not distributing funds properly. His company, this charity that he owned, that was taking all these donations, had loaned out massive lump sums, over 500,000 Canadian, to 2 companies. The 2 companies that the charity had loaned money to were both owned by, you guessed it, Greg Kerfoot. So he was taking the donations from all these people that were like, yeah, charity, like, we're doing something for the province, like, this is going back into like youth football and everything. He then loaned them to his companies. Go on, Matt, answer me this. What do you think the interest was on these loans?
I couldn't tell you, but I'm assuming it's quite high.
Man, it was nothing.
Was it?
Absolutely fuck all. So
you
like,
think you think it'd be a way of like kind of moving funds around through an interest rate, you know?
Yeah, I honestly, because I suppose so. If he'd have done it that way, but I
Can
don't
move.
understand. And get this. So he scammed the CRA, scammed the fucking investors, scammed everyone along the way, basically. What do you think the name of the foundation was?
Was something with his last name?
Nah, man, it was called the Loyalty Foundation. Fucking Loyalty Foundation. Man knows less about loyalty than anybody I've ever met, I think. Like, what is that?
Well,
Like,
no,
so
he
this is the
does.
issue with it. Like,
Go on.
he should not be in charge of a football club when he's up to shady shit like that on the side.
And I mean, to counter your point, is that why they have somebody like Axel Schuster in to like run this club? Because before it was Leonarduzzi, um, and then Leonarduzzi steps down for known reasons, which we won't get into.
Yeah.
And Schuster comes in, and he seems to be doing like a top level job, I would say.
Well, he came from the German, like the top of the German
Yeah,
leagues, right? Like he was it at Stuttgart or something? I can't remember where he
I'll
came from exactly,
yeah.
but I know that it was like quite an acquisition and quite a coup when the Whitecaps got him. But I think you've got to look at the team, man. At the end of the day, the owners they basically took the Davies money and ran. And I don't know if there was a little bit of me that was hopeful that with Alfonso Davies being like in the last year of his contract at Bayern and looking likely to leave, I'm honestly thinking because he hasn't gone in the summer now, is there a chance that somebody comes in and just puts in like 20, 30 million for him to Bayern in the winter window, January? Maybe that's the reason why they've opted for the third DP spot.
Yeah, so that's kind of the biggest news of the week, I think, in terms of what's happened with the Whitecaps. It's not this LAFC game. Is we had until August 14th to kind of decide the model that, like, not the model, yeah, the model that we were going to kind of follow. So in the MLS, there's two models. There's the designated player model, which is having the three designated players and then having three under 22 kind of like initiative players where
Yeah.
it helps kind of grow your team.
Yeah.
And then the other model, which I think we all kind of expected, was the under 22 model, where you keep your two designated player slots, and then you have four under 22 initiatives. And then by choosing that model, you're actually given an additional $2 million in general allocation money. And I know the rumor mill in the last couple weeks leading up to that was that we were going to kind of go this route. We were going to buy Cubas down, because Cubas is he's on just over $1 million a year. So buy him down with the general allocation money to free up another designated player spot, which kind of would make more sense.
Mm.
I know that the general allocation money has to be used in that season, and like there's a little bit more on the back end to it. But I think that's what everyone thought. And now we freed up the third spot. And like
Mm.
now we're free to sign any free agent. Mid September is when the not the transfer window, but the MLS roster freeze is.
Yeah.
Because obviously we've gone through the transfer market and we've talked about this at length now. I feel like we're just like beating a dead horse about how bad our
Yeah.
transfer market really was. And it's funny because if you look at a lot of different supporter blogs around the MLS, they've graded the transfer window, and the Whitecaps is quite low. I think we got like a C minus.
What do you expect, man? Like we brought in one player. It's
So,
yeah.
so I mean, I feel like at this point everybody knows, and we've we've covered it extensively. The window was very lackluster. So now we've got a third designated player spot. And really, I don't think we can be critical of the choice in this model until the roster freeze. Because anything can happen now. Right? And I think you're right. Like, we're going to look at the ownership group now, and we're going to look at Kerfoot, and we're going to see what actually happens. Because are they willing to pony up the money to, and I'm not saying like, oh, we should get like Memphis Depay, which was like the crazy rabbit hole that Whitecap supporters were going down, because I think the Whitecaps recently followed Memphis Depay on Instagram. And then next thing you know, we choose this model. So I think a lot of people were like, oh my God, it's Memphis Depay coming in. Like, and it's not. Let's be honest here. But
that would be the best signing, best we could hope for, I think. Like, best case scenario, yeah. But very, very most unlikely scenario as well.
This is the most unlikely. What are you talking about? Like,
yeah.
I love the what ifs. Like, I'll always be like, imagine Memphis, you know? But like, I think at the same time, like, we need to be realistic. Like, it's not happening.
No.
And if it is happening, I'm willing to sit on this podcast and just be like, well, I was insanely wrong. And not only was I wrong, I've gone out and bought the kit. Like, so I'll sit here and be the biggest hypocrite on that stance and be like, well, like, it happened. But I think, like, you know, I'm not going to say like, okay, Marco Royce is somebody we should go after. Like, I don't think the Whitecap style fits necessarily like an older European talent that's kind of dropped out of minutes.
No. Yeah.
But what I would table is somebody like a Carlos Vela, you know, an MLS proven player, I think would be something where if we could get a signing like that to occupy that designated player spot, that is the smartest thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think getting, obviously, it'd been nice to get the big designated player from Europe, but at the same time, getting somebody that has the MLS experience, that has tons of goals in the MLS already, that just knows the league inside out, maybe that is more valuable than bringing in like a big name player to sell shirts. Like, yeah, the big name player might do his bit, but at least, you know, Carlos Vela, I think it guarantees you like maybe 15 goals a season if you're playing him, like week in, week out sort of thing, if he's capable.
And this is the tricky part, is a lot of these big name players are strikers, because when, and I mean, I'm like, the way I'm going to say this is like when strikers get old, and I'm not saying 40's old, like what, we're 33, you know, but we're also not 20 and a striker.
Yeah.
So I think when strikers do get on the older side, the pace drops, things that really were your advantage when you were 20 are kind of now a disadvantage for you. And that's how you kind of fall out of minutes in Europe.
Yeah.
And I know that like a lot of the MLS transfers have been strikers, right? Giroux, Suarez, you
Zlatan,
know, like
Giovinco,
Zlatan,
Insigne.
Yeah, like a lot of them are more attacking players. Even Messi's more of an attacking player.
Man, you missed your boy.
Sorry?
You missed your man. Drogba. Your favorite player ever.
He still could have played at a high level. He had just come off a Premier League win.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, like, that's kind of what I mean, is that there are a lot more attacking players. Like, so I think what the Whitecaps need is like a midfielder, and to get a designated midfielder, like, you're not going out and getting like Frankie de Jong. You know, like, it's not going to be a big name European player that's kind of fallen out of minutes.
Yeah. And you know what would have been nice had he not retired? Tony Cruz. But then again, like, that is a player that had he said, "Oh, I'm going to go to the MLS," it wouldn't have been a case of teams like going for him. He would have said, "I'm going to go to the MLS
He
and I want
picks
to
the
play
team.
here." Yeah,
He picks the team. And I mean, like, okay, to counter your point with like Tony Cruz, like you could say like Luka Modric is like a player that potentially could be looking at an MLS move. That's not someone the Whitecaps are going to get. Like, you don't put that name with the Whitecaps. Like, we
yeah,
need to really rely on our scouting department for this third designated player spot. And with how soon the roster freeze is, it's just going to kind of come and go, I think.
yeah. I think so.
So
What?
it's
Yeah,
exciting to sit here and play a game of what ifs.
yeah,
But I think like we also need to be realistic.
yeah.
And like
Yeah,
even saying like Carlos Vela, it's not happening. Like I think the roster we have now is essentially going to be the roster that we need to challenge for the MLS Cup with.
yeah, yeah. I think so, mate. I think so. I think that as Vancouver fans, we now have a bit of history, let's say, of being, man, not even led on by the club, because yeah, they might have done this, but they didn't release anything. I suppose they didn't come out and say, "Oh, we're going to look at signing a new player." They just said, "This is a model we're going forward with." I think we are very hopeful and very optimistic when we really shouldn't be, just based on how the club has handled transfer windows and how the club has operated in the past. I don't think it calls for optimism around a transfer window. I think it calls for a bit more of a pessimistic approach where you kind of like, what shit are we going to drag in? And, every now and then, when they're fucking dragging in these buckets of shit that they bring in, there's one like fucking golden rock just hiding out at the bottom, and he just runs the fucking team.
And I'd actually disagree with what you just said about like buckets of crap, because I think in recent years, like I would say like honestly probably since Schuster's joined, is that we're not getting big name players, but we're getting pieces of what we need. Whereas pre-Schuster, I would
Yeah.
say yes, there's been like buckets of shit.
Yeah. You know what, Matt? Actually, what you said there is more right. Since Schuster has come in, the club has operated, I think, way more efficiently and way better in the market for sure. They still do some questionable things, like the Javane Brown thing, like letting him go to
Yeah.
waivers. Like, surely we could have got some money out of that and like earned a bit back from it, because he had started a lot of games for the Whitecaps. He's an international player. There's got to be some value in that player somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's still the questionable ones. Like, even Julian Gressel. Did they just release Julian Gressel so he could go back to the East Coast?
I'd have to pull it up, but I think it was like general allocation money and things like that.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I think the club is definitely growing and is definitely going in the right way. But I still think there are times where, man, I don't know if we've got a bit of a difference of opinion on this, but I feel as though Adekube was not really a Whitecaps player. Like, should never have been signed for the Whitecaps. Krylak tries his best, does as much as he can. Not really a Whitecap style of player when you think about it.
So let's pause here, because I think you've got some really good points here, and I kind of want to run this by you first. Is I've got a list of when the players were signed. So my assumption is that Schuster kind of joined in like early 2023, right?
I'd say before that, like maybe 22, early. You
Okay.
might be right, actually, man. Though, like, COVID screwed me up. I don't know what happened.
It kind of screwed everything up, because you're kind of disorganized of like what dates were, because it all kind of just like merged together. So let's look at, so Adekube joined in 2023. That was in last transfer window. He joined with
Yeah.
Larea. I think for that transfer that was more like a homecoming, you know. Sam Adekube was one of those academy Whitecaps players, joined the first team, kind of made the move to Europe at a younger age. Successful, played for the national team, some minutes at the World Cup, and I think the transfer back was more of a homecoming, and not necessarily paying off. I think if Sam Adekube was completely fit, kind of dominating and pushing players in his position to elevate to what he was playing, it's a totally different podcast entirely of me and you sitting here and praising Schuster, being like that was the greatest kind of homecoming that we could have
Yeah.
gone through. Okay, so Schuster was actually appointed in 2020. So
Okay, so that's 4 years.
that's both of us completely wrong here. So let's look at the 2023 signings then. Okay, so Laborda comes in 2023. Brian White obviously in 2022. So Tristan
Both good signs.
Blackman, Takeoka, those are all class of 2023. And then also Veselinovic. Who else we got? Bearhalter. These are all like when they were the contract details, so
Yeah.
not necessarily when they joined the Whitecaps. But that being said, like you do absorb that contract. It's not necessarily the date they
Well,
signed, right?
based on the players that you have listed there, if they come into the club after Schuster, like these are very good players. Like every player that you listed there probably has a very decent resale value back in, into the MLS if like
Yeah.
somebody wanted one. The one player that I am interested to see when he came in, because I genuinely think, and this isn't to be nasty, this isn't like mean or anything, it's just an honest opinion, that Luis Martins is our weakest state field player. I'm just wondering, does it show when he came into the club, was that before or after Schuster? Because that signing for me was a bad signing. He should have been moved on last year.
Yeah. I can pull that up too. But his contract was, it looks like 2022.
Yeah, I think Shop must have come in after Schuster, because I'm guessing he came at the same time as he came from the no.
So Martins came in 2022. So these are all after Schuster's been appointed. So I think kind of what I'm getting out of this is that the Whitecaps have never gone for big names. That's not the problem. We don't need an older player who's run out of minutes in Europe that we're going to build a team around. I think Schuster's gone out and got a lot of pieces, and it's more about just joining them together. But I think me and you could agree on that it's almost a race against the clock, because we're sitting here and being like, we've got a very good squad right now. Maybe it's not as deep as we would like, maybe it's not a full 23-man roster where we're like, any of those players could kind of go out there and really own their position, but it's also not a clusterfuck of 45 players like Chelsea is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of in that gray area of like, okay, we've got on their day 15 players that can go out there and challenge for the MLS Cup. I die on that hill that our squad could challenge for the MLS Cup as is right now. Sure, there's missing pieces. Sure, there's an area where me and you can sit here and really debate on who should be there, if they should be on the squad. But when push comes to shove at BC Place, 20,000 plus people, we could challenge for the MLS Cup. We saw what we did against LAFC tactically. Obviously, we crashed out of the League's Cup. Let's, whatever, put a pin in that. But I think the performances week in and week out, we definitely should be challenging.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. My thing is, I think in Cubas and Gold, we have two players who are maybe in the top 7 players in the league in their positions.
Yeah.
And both players, both Cubas and Gold, I think they're both 28 or turning 28 this year.
They're both
But
28.
that for me is peak years for a midfielder.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why the ownership isn't looking at this and saying, we have two fucking outstanding players, better than realistically better than anybody we've had at the club before. We've got very good secondary players, who aren't the star player, I hate to be shitty, and this isn't meant as anywhere negative or a shitty comment about him, but I'd say Brian White is the secondary player. You've got Golden Kubaso are the main two, then you've got your Brian Whites, Veselinovic, at being that second ladder.
And I think that's not a shitty comment, because we know, I mean, we obviously know this club. We don't know the ins and outs of this club. But as somebody who doesn't know the club, is more of a neutral fan, a fair weather Vancouver fan, they're going to know Ryan Gauld. They're probably not even going to know Cubas, to be honest, because reality is we need to market the club, and Ryan Gauld is 100% our best player. And to be honest, Cubas is earning, over $1 million. We need to be able to market that as well, right?
Yeah, maybe as well. Maybe marketing Ryan Gauld has a bit more of a pull on it than Cubas. Cubas is a very, very quiet player. I know Ryan Gould's very quiet, but Cubas just turns up on the pitch, is very tidy in what he does, seems to do his job, and just is out of there. Do you know what I mean? He's very... Yeah, I don't think he... Whereas Ryan Gauld, it's... Yeah, like you say, I guess they market the shit out of him. Every single poster, Gauld is on there.
But
so he does get the
recognition. It's not even that. He scores. He has assists. He attacks. He defends. He's creative. He crosses the ball. He is realistically an all-around player. And I think when... I hate to say it, but when neutral fans go, that when you want to take your family out and go to a Whitecaps game, they're gonna know Ryan Gauld. It's the same as the Canucks, right? You're gonna know that first three on the first line. You're gonna know Quinn Hughes is the captain, because he's out in front. And I think it's great that we do have, from a marketing side, Ryan Gauld. And it's very interesting. I know it's floating around Instagram right now as an article on Ryan Gauld. And it's... How would you describe it? It's not a memoir, but it's more of
It's just him opening up. It kind of is a memoir, really, mate. It's just him opening up about his time in the city, what he's been doing here, his time, how him and his wife enjoy it here and stuff,
And there was one piece. There was one piece that I kind of pulled out, is that he's not an open person. He's very much he's very much just in the shadows. That's how he wants to operate. Getting pushed out into the limelight isn't his necessarily comfy place.
I did see one thing in that interview, or not even an interview, mate, but that little manuscript of what he said there, and it was quite funny. And it said, his words: "Had I have known that they were going to start calling me the Goldfather, I'd have had it in my contract that was vetoed right away."
Right? I thought it was
because that's funny. And then he also said, "It's." Man, the differences between the European leagues and the MLS. He said, he was "Oh yeah, it was weird. We're at an away game, and they have a hospitality section for the home fans, at the away game sort of thing. right next to the tunnel where they're walking out. And he said, yeah, so like in Europe, in England, in like Scotland, you couldn't have that because if you let an away team walk out next to the player, next to the fans, they're going to have things pelted at them. They're going to be
Bottles.
abused. Like they're going to be screamed at. And Gold said he was like, yeah, it was quite weird that one of the people in the hospitality section turned around and shouted to us, "Hey guys, I hope you enjoy our city." And Gold was kind of like, "What
What?
did this guy just say?" Like, what? Like, not even knowing, like, because you wouldn't, right? Like, you'd be used to people saying, like, "Get the fuck out of here! I hope you die," and all this, like,
Throwing
just really
bottles, like beer.
And then
Like, there's
one
a
of the
reason
guys,
why. There's a reason why all the Premier Leagues rip out the tunnels. That comes from like the bowels of the stadium, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why. I mean, we've obviously all seen the like blogs and stuff, but at Anfield, the away changing room is in the Kop end because you can feel the people jumping up and down. You know what I mean? Like, the way European football stadiums are designed is to intimidate the fuck out of opposing players, right?
They
It is,
design it so the fans are the 12th player.
and I've always kind of said, like, the goal is to make BC Place a fortress, and with how big it is, it's almost impossible. And I mean, this ties back to like your point of like, oh, we need a football specific stadium. We need something to play to our advantage, and that infrastructure probably won't come. Like, we were very critical of the owners at first, and I think it's rightfully so as well, because all of the good things Schuster's done since joining the club, I would be curious to know the support he has from the ownership group.
Yeah, and how involved they are.
How involved are they? Is this more of like a hands-off situation? Is this more of like a, kind of play within the lines, use your target allocation money, use your general allocation money? I understand that the MLS is on a salary cap and those numbers are public, but it's like, how much further are they willing to support Schuster in what he's doing? Because me and you will sit here and we will kind of criticize transfer windows, we'll criticize Schuster, but ultimately that's going to come from the ownership. And I think it was very empowering for you to call it out, because it has to be. Like, we can't sit here and blame Schuster because he's trying to do a job. And in my opinion, he's done a very good job. We could look at on-field tactics. We could look at things like that. Game by game, like, oh, did Vanny make the right tactical sub? But ultimately, this comes from the top, and it's going to bleed down into the club.
Yeah, I think so. This honestly takes me back to the point that I was making there about them having Gold and Kubas in the primes. They should be looking at that as owners and saying, listen, we've got 2 players, top 7 in the league, in the positions. This is a time that if we buy Kubas down, so now they've got the 3 DPs, if they buy Kubas down, so he's
they missed that.
But
they missed that opportunity, because if they had gone
for the under money in, right?
If they had chosen the under 22 model, we would have looked at $2 million in general allocation money, which could have bought Kubas down. And we would have basically freed up 2 designated player spots, right? In the sense that
because it'd have only been 1 still though, because you'd pay Kubas down.
No, sorry, it would still be 1. It'd still be 1. Yeah, you would get essentially another under 22. And then you would technically have a designated player spot freed up because Kubas would have been bought down to under the amounts. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that, it'd be nice if, because I wonder where we're sat at the moment in terms of the budget and things. Like, if there is 400,000 or whatever it is to buy Kubas down, for me, that is like very, very important. With him not being so much higher than like let's say you get rid of Fafa Pico, who's on 690,000 a year. That money there could be then used, push that into Kubas, bring him out of the DP spot. That frees up two. You can get two decent players. You could sign another midfielder that is DP, just like coming to the end of his contract in Europe, and then maybe an attacker that, man, expend a bit of money. Like, do something. Bring a very, very good attacker in to play up top with Brian White and Ryan Gold, whilst giving them the creativity behind them that makes it so Gold doesn't have to do everything. You'd have a team that is very, very capable of challenging the very best in the league.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're fucking two very good players away from being a very top team. I think the defense is very good at the moment. I think Veselinovic is fucking brilliant. Laborda over the last few weeks playing in that right centre back sort of role has been very good. Even at right wing back when we played against who was that? The Mexican team, Tijuana. They double. Oh no, it wasn't. It was against LA. Where him and Albuni doubled up on the Wanga all game. Like, excellent. So I think the defense is pretty good. Utvik has looked fantastic, other than the Pumas game where he had the worst game of his fucking Whitecaps career. But I'm not trying to be too harsh on that because of how good he's been for the club. So yeah, man, I really do think that we are two signings, maybe two DPs, and then just like a couple of squad players, like rotational players, that are slightly better than what we've got, away from being a top 5 team in the MLS.
See, I would agree and I would disagree. And I would agree that we are two signings away from being a top 5 team, but I would disagree in the sense that we are not a top 5 team at the moment.
Like, you think we are a top 5 team?
I think we are a top 5 team in the MLS. When Vanny gets his tactics right, everybody's clicking. I feel like we could go into any situation prepared with the squad we have at the moment. We've probably got one of the best defensive lines in a healthy Blackman, healthy Veselinovic, healthy Laborda. I think that is the best defensive line, because the cherry on top is I think we have one of the most trustworthy goalkeepers in the league.
Yeah, I think Taki's very good. Like, I really like Takioka. I read something the other day, and it was someone, I don't know what I read it on. It might have been Twitter, and it was like there's a problem at the Whitecaps where they can't upgrade from Takioka.
They can't.
And I was like, why are you trying to upgrade? Like, just fucking chill. Takaoka's good. Like,
the only upgrade in the world is Neuer.
Yeah. I suppose they could take one of Chelsea's 6 keepers when they have to release one.
But that's what I mean, is like we have the best, I would say, the best defensive back team. Like, when we're in our third on the counter, everybody's positionally correct, we are probably one of the best. Because we are anchored by Takaoka, who can play it out from the back. He's good with the ball at his feet. That's another thing, is that I think we overlook, is how good he is playing it out from the back.
Even how many times? Long balls and things, man. Like,
that's what I mean. How many times has he had the ball at his feet? The striker comes in and he does like a little flick between them, or puts it behind and sends the striker for a complete hot dog. Like,
honestly, it's so fucking like entertaining to watch. But when you're at the stadium and there's an attacker running on him, and then he Cruyffs in at the last moment and plays it like out to the border or something,
and just plays like a short 10-yard pass.
That moment though of when the attacker gets within like a yard of him and he does the Cruyff, it's like, you can almost feel it in the stadium, that all the air in the stadium is like just sucked out because everyone goes. And
well, you see,
he just put it, and I was like, "Fucking no."
Well, you just see the striker coming at Takaoka, their head drops, like they're like, "Oh, okay." and he's kind of got Takeoka has. If you watch how he plays, he has this smile, like he knows what he's doing.
Man,
So
he smiles even after he's conceded. Like, he is a happy man.
he's
Like,
he's
just out there,
fantastic.
like, this is where I am. I'm enjoying my day.
So that's what I mean is like from the back, we're not probably. We are one of the better teams in the MLS. Going forward, we are one of the better teams because we have Ryan Gauld, Brian White, Fafa Pico. I'd also throw DeMar Krylak in there because he is a rotational player. When he gets it right, can come off the bench as a sub, and not necessarily be a super sub, but you have faith because he can get it done in the MLS. He's proven to get it done. Where the Whitecaps lack is between that. It's the midfield. And it's not the defensive side with Cubas. It's the creativity side.
Yeah.
And that is starting to be better. Berhalter's made a lot of improvements. Vite is hit or miss. And the one thing about Vite, I know that we like shit on him quite a lot because that's what we do. We'll also give him his flowers when he deserves it. But he's only 22. Like,
yeah, I forget how young he is, man. I feel like he's been at the club for like 6 years.
That's what I mean. It feels like he's been there forever, but he's only 22. So obviously, like, maturity is gonna happen. We're gonna see experience kind of come in, but it's that middle line. And I think if you watch a lot of games from a tactical standpoint, you can see the lack of creativity, the lack of progressive passes, the lack of through balls, over the top balls. It comes from the midfield.
Yeah, man. I will say that is where I feel in the last, especially this season, I feel that Who's It has come in and sort of done very well in the middle when we've needed someone. Berhalter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he has been the guy that, especially in the last like couple of weeks though when Ryan Gauld was injured, he sort of became the man that everyone turned to. Like, he was the one running, chasing balls down. He was the one trying to play them like balls in and like inspire something and like play a good ball and like play the progressive passes. And yeah, I think there's a bit of a chop and a change that is definitely needed. And as we didn't do it in the months just gone, at the end of the season, there definitely needs to be a slight restructuring of that midfield. And I think they just need to lay it out as what it is and put the front three or the three midfielders of Cubas, do your layout, put Cubas in it, put Ryan Gauld in it, and put Brian White up top.
Yeah.
And then from that moment there, you build a team around them three players, what suits to how they play. So you start looking at players that can actually benefit them and like, contribute their playing style. And that's where I think, getting two DPs that could actually contribute them three players would be massive.
And that's why, kind of going back to the point we've both made, is that it's not going to come from a big name player out of Europe that's fallen out of minutes and kind of looking to ride off into a retirement league, It's going to come from scouting. It's going to come from Schuster kind of basically being creative with his accounting in the sense of like, how do we buy players down to fit it all in?
Yeah, I think so.
And it's also going to come from the ownership group being supportive of Schuster to explore other options. And I get it. Like, we get it. Football's a business. Like you said, we're operating at a loss. BC Place takes 50% of the gate because of how the club is set up in the sense that we don't have our own stadium.
But it also means, with BC Place being able to take 50% of the gate, like we touched on right at the beginning, that when they have the fucking BC Home and Garden Show, it displaces the Whitecaps.
Yeah.
And then they've got to go play at Starlight Stadium on the island. That, to me, is the most bizarre thing that has ever happened. well, I've been a fan of this club. Like,
Yeah.
there have been some weird things that have happened as well, man. But like,
And you kind of
that
like
one right there,
shrug your shoulders. You're like, whatever. But
yeah,
that's yeah. And I think like as we reach, I don't know, do we call it the halfway point? Because it still feels like we have a lot of football left.
yeah, it's a lot of
Like
home games coming up. That's
it
for sure.
feels like how like we've got
10 is though. 22, 23. Yeah, it must
so
be
yeah,
about
there's like
12
11
games.
or 10. There's potentially like 12 games here given with the MLS championship. Or sorry,
Yeah,
the Canadian championship. But I'm going to call it the halfway point because it feels like it for me and you. um is that what boxes do we need to tick now? Obviously, transfer market's come and gone. We've criticized that. We've kind of laid out what we would have wanted, what we thought we were going to get, what we hoped for, our dreams and wishes. Um, but we didn't get any of that. Christmas did not come for us as Whitecaps fans.
no, it did not.
Instead, it was like a Christmas Eve where it was like kind of the anticipation was there without the presents.
Yeah, I suppose in that little window there, we did get a Campo at the end.
We got a Campo. We got a weird move with Javaine Brown, but we didn't get what me and you thought we wanted.
No.
So that's what I'm kind of labeling it as like Christmas Eve and not Christmas. So what boxes do we need to tick? Obviously, the Canadian Championship. And I'm talking in terms of how we finish the season out. The Canadian Championship at this point has to be that. I mean, that has to come home, right?
Yeah, we should be wrapping that up, I think. And especially if we get to a point here where Forge actually beat Toronto again, and Forge go through to the final, and it ends up being Vancouver against Forge, then I think in that situation, though, we should be. Well, we're going to the game favourites anyway. We should be sort of wrapping that one up. So I think, yeah, the ticking the Canadian Championship off is one. And the other one for me, I would be aiming.
Let's be realistic. Let's not just say like we're going to do a double. Like we're not going to win the MLS championship. We're going to win the Canadian championship. We're going to win the Cascadia Cup. Like we're going to win it all. Like we're going to win the Europa. Like let's be realistic here.
Not for me. My ideal situation to finish the season here would be finish fourth or higher, get the home advantage for the playoffs, and just have a good showing in the playoffs. Don't go out in the first round again. Like, get us through to the second round of a playoffs. Like, let us experience that. And you know what? If we got through to the second round of the playoffs, and again, like, I should probably be a bit more optimistic and a bit more hopeful, but realistically, I think the second round of the playoffs for right now, for like the team that we've got, I think it'd be good. Seeing how the other teams have just strengthened as well. Like, you've just had Drew go to LAFC. Who just signed for LA Galaxy? Royce. Like, them teams above us have strengthened where we have not. So that's why I think just being hopeful for a top four finish is, mine, and then getting through. Because who would we play? It'd be like Minnesota or something, right?
Oh, we could go down a full hour podcast of who we might play in the playoffs. I'd agree with you. I think the Canadian Championship is an absolute, not even like, it's an absolute must at the bare minimum. Like at the bare minimum, we need to secure Champions League football for next CONCACAF Champions League football. Like obviously,
I agree with that.
That I think at the bare minimum now should become a standard for us as Whitecaps fans. Like every year, we should be in that tournament via the Canadian Championship route. Whether whether that's, I mean, we should be in that competition. I would love to see us progress further in that, but that's a different topic for another season.
Yo, man, all they've got to do is not fucking like put us against Tigres.
Yeah, apparently they're our kryptonite.
Give us a different team.
But and then I'd agree, top four. I think having the home field advantage in the playoffs and not and pushing it to a second round,
Yeah.
a second round tournament.
Yeah, and it's something to
Because
build on then.
it's something, like you said, it's something to build on. We've got Cubas and Galt in their prime, and I think like I said, we have a top 5 MLS team. I'll die on that hill arguing all of the statistics, the what ifs, everything. Like, I genuinely believe we are a top 5 team. I wouldn't have said that in years past.
Yeah.
I'll always be not hypercritical. I'm also not overly supportive. I think I'm being realistic in that. And yeah, I think those are the boxes to tick. And we prepare for a run in here. And I mean, we can say all this, but I guess Tuesday, the 27th, we'll figure it out. Because we play Pacific at home, which is a tricky game in the sense that you don't know what to expect. You're playing a CPL side, and it's unpredictable. You know what you get when you play an MLS side, right? There's a certain level of play, certain style of play, certain level of conditioning to expect. But when you go against the unknown I mean, I don't want to disrespect them by saying a lower league, but a lower league team, right?
Well, yeah. And it must be almost galvanizing for the players of the lower league team when they come up against an MLS side, because
it's a
if it was me
showcase.
playing that game, I'd want to have my best game of the year. Like, if I was saving my best game of the year for a certain game, it'd be the game like the MLS team. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. So, because who's watching that game? Everybody. Is this a game where, Vanny sees something in one of their players and is like, okay, that's the missing piece, because he completely turned Bearhalter in and out all game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting. And I think, to your point too, that like the ownership needs to be held a little bit more accountable from us as supporters, because we want results. We're not okay with falling out of a playoff fixture, falling out of a Canadian championship. Like, I think Schuster has gotten us to a point where me and you are now not expecting things, but this is the standard we set now.
You're isn't like demanding it of the club. Like, that's what it is. You're almost demanding it of the club now. Like, we've been through the shit where we were like hanging around at the bottom of the MLS table there for a while.
Are we going to get playoffs? Like, we've lost Canadian championships in the 90th minute, where me and you have been like, good game. Yeah. Like, Toronto had our number.
Yeah, but now we're building, and it's... I don't know, man. I don't know.
And I think you're right. You're right to be critical of the ownership, because they've gotten us to this point now where we can turn and say, hey, us as supporters, this is what we want. Not this is what we want. This is what we need now.
Yeah.
This is the standard that you've set, because you've employed Schuster, who's completely turned this club around from, for lack of better words, like bringing in buckets of shit to bringing in buckets of gold. Right? Yeah. Like I said, we're completely not wrong. And now we've got to basically see this out.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting final 12 games of the season here, and just see how it actually pans out, because honestly, if it all goes to shit, we get knocked out by Pacific here on the 27th.
And we'll have a rocking podcast.
And if we dropped out of the playoffs there, as a fan, I honestly don't know how I would take that. I really don't know.
Man, I threw a full-on hissy fit when Pumas knocked us out. Wait, what are you talking about? I full-on threw a hissy fit and charged out of the stadium. Not you know what I mean? Was genuinely misplaced.
2 kids over on the way out.
Get out of my way. I'm going home. But I think that is the reaction that everybody should have now.
Yeah.
because of where we are as a club. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's just us as supporters believing in the club, wanting the club to succeed, and kind of, I mean, like living and breathing the club and breathing the football
Yeah.
versus showing up and being like, well, hope we don't get blown the fuck out tonight because, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Well, yeah.
raining and I didn't want to come. Had to walk down Robson in the pouring rain. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's us this week. This is kind of an off week just because we didn't have any action. This is our first podcast where we didn't have any action, so we kind of have to go into our back pocket of things we wanted to talk about. And I know
Yeah.
the ownership was one that like you were really passionate about, rightfully so.
Yeah. The honest, there is a few more. We've got a good off season coming up, I think.
Absolutely. And then yeah, so we'll be there for the Pacific game. And we'll be there for fan reactions. I think we're going to try some new stuff out to get you some more Whitecaps content and kind of be that epicenter of Whitecaps content for everyone. So we'll have some new things to roll out.
No, that sounds good.
But yeah, that's all for us. We'll sign off here.
Alrighty, take care, everyone.
All right, cheers. Thanks for listening to another episode of Caps Cast presented by Whitecaps Fan TV. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram listed below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content.